Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And in this episode of God Talk, we are continuing our series on the most Googled questions about God and the Bible. And up until this point, we've talked about does life have a purpose? Last week, we talked about is there a God? Or I kind of redid it, basically saying, can you prove there's a God? And I personally like that one. I think it would you might do well to listen to that one. And then today, what we want to talk about is the number 3 Google question about God is why does God allow pain and suffering? And I have to tell you that that's just always it's always a big question that people ask. Why does God allow pain and suffering? And here's the problem, like it doesn't matter what answer I give you. It's not going to like fully help. I mean, I hear people say all the time, God works through it, and He does. I'm going to talk about that. But if you're going through it, and if you're in it, like that doesn't make it better. It doesn't make you happy about it or enjoy it or like it's just that is. In the end, if you're going through pain and suffering, it seems somewhat of an inadequate answer. So you're not going to like the answer, but here's the answer. Why does God allow pain and suffering in the world? Well, because it's part of the world. For Him to remove pain and suffering, there would have to be a new world. In fact, He tells us that there will be a world in which there is no pain and suffering, but it's not going to be this world. And so if you want to get straight to that place, then like the world's got to come to an end. And that may mean that like people that you know right now that don't believe, that might eventually end up believing, might mean that like they don't get to go to heaven. So in the fullness of time, God will bring this world to an end. And He will bring a world that there is no more pain and suffering. But why is there? Well, because it's part of the world. It'd be like, well, why is there a sun? Well, it's part of the world. Now, it wasn't originally, it's part of the solar system, which gives light to the world and heat and so forth. But there was a time in which pain and suffering weren't part of the world. And I hesitate on that a little bit because it's that word pain. Because remember in Genesis, as part of the curse, God says, I will greatly increase your pain in childbearing. So the sensation of pain isn't a bad thing. It's not an evil thing. Like it tells us what to touch and not touch. We were never created in a way that you could stick your hand in fire and wouldn't get burned. So pain is part of life, physical pain, right? Now, I think we could say maybe emotional pain and so forth wasn't a part of it. Disease wasn't a part of it, but pain was part of God's original creation. So suffering then comes in with the fall into sin. And so you would never not have a world without pain in this world that God's created. Like, once again, you've got to have that. But we have way more pain than what He intended in the way that He created it. And we have suffering now. And why do we have it? Because you wouldn't have this world if you didn't. I told you that probably isn't going to be a very satisfactory answer, but it's the only like correct answer you're ever going to hear. I'm going to give you other things that God uses pain and suffering. And that's where people always go to answer the question, well, God will do this and God will do that. Like He uses pain and suffering, but the reason why we have it is the fall into sin. And for Him to remove it means that we're no longer living in this world in which He created and put us in. We're in the realm of the new heaven and new earth. All right. So because it's now part of this world forever until the new heaven and the new earth, we need to understand that God uses it. And so, and that sometimes brings some level of comfort in the midst of your pain and suffering. It's not like You're not going to be like, thank you, Jesus, for my pain and suffering. But I think it sometimes makes it more bearable to go through pain and suffering if we can understand that there's purpose behind it. So part of the purpose is God uses pain and suffering in our lives is it builds us. It makes us stronger. It builds our faith because as you go through pain and suffering, like a lot of times you just can't get through it on your own. So we have to rely on God to get us through it. And when he does, like our faith gets stronger. We learn to trust him more. And faith is a powerful thing. And when you learn to trust God, that's a powerful thing. So we spiritually mature in very significant ways through pain and suffering. The scripture talks about this in multiple places. I remember from a favorite devotional I had many, many, many years ago, it talked about Mr. Wilson's trees. And the guy talked about how he planted his own trees and he always kind of babied them, and, watered them, like weeded around, like he did everything to possibly like take care of those trees and give those trees like everything that they needed to succeed. Then he talks about his neighbor, Mr. Wilson, and he's talking tongue in cheek, but basically Mr. Wilson did nothing for his trees. He talks about he's out there beating on it with the newspaper. I mean, he's using like a metaphor there, but basically Mr. Wilson would do nothing for his trees. They kind of had to learn to get through it on their own. He wasn't bracing them up with stakes when they were young, to protect them from the wind. He, wasn't, spraying them or, giving them, fertilizer or whatever. Like they were on their own. And he talks about how he went back to the neighborhood, like some 30 years later after he moved away. His trees were long gone, but Mr. Wilson's were still there. Why? Because they had to go through that adversity, and in that adversity, they learned how to deal with life and all the things that come the way of trees. He kind of babied, and I guess you'd argue they weren't tough enough. They didn't grow enough. They didn't become strong enough because he coddled them too much. Well, that's true about life, isn't it? When people are coddled too much in life, they a little adversity breaks them. A little bit of stress causes them anxiety and depression and all of these different things. And so God uses pain and suffering in this earth to make us stronger people, to make us stronger Christians, and to help us to realize our full potential. So there's purpose in it. There's a blessing behind it. Once again, that doesn't answer why we have it. We have it because it's part of this world. And it can't be taken away unless the world's taken away. But there's purpose in it. God uses it. He uses it to build us up. And he also, through pain and suffering, uses it to cause people to come to faith. Now, you can think about the martyrs. The spread of Christianity spreads the most when the church is being persecuted, when people see people going to their death because they believe in God and they're so strong in their faith that they're willing to, like Peter, be crucified upside down, Paul beheaded, and just, people being burnt at the stake, and just people have died in gruesome ways in lions' dens and so forth. People have died those ways because of their faith in God. And when people see that, like they want what those people have. So it's through pain and suffering of the martyrs that the faith has grown. So, God not only uses it to build our faith and trust and make us into stronger people, but God literally uses it to advance his kingdom, to bring people to faith. And then you can also, and I see this oftentimes as a pastor, that a lot of times God can't get people's attention, but when you lose a spouse, when you lose a kid, when you lose maybe a parent, it hurts you so much, it devastates you so much that one, like, you've got to reach out to something greater than yourself for comfort. And if we're going to be honest, like, it causes you to want to hope that there's a heaven, and that there's a resurrection from the dead. And so oftentimes, like, parents don't necessarily live to see this, but maybe they've raised their kids in the faith, and after the kids graduate from high school, they kind of fall away. They're in their 30s, it's just not a priority. But when mom or dad dies, and then suddenly, like, they come back around and they come back to faith. So that's because of pain, suffering, and death. Now, you may not like the fact that we have pain, suffering, and death in this world, but what you also got to remember is God experienced it. God sent his son Jesus into this world who experienced all the pain, all the suffering, all the hurt that you and I will ever have to experience in our lives. I mean, especially when we look at the end of his life, in the way that, he's falsely accused and whipped, beaten, spat upon, mocked, crown of thorns in the head, and nailed to a cross to slowly asphyxiate. I mean, God knows pain and suffering. And so here's the encouragement, right? Like, it's just got to be part of this world. It just has to be. The good news is God works all things for the good of those who love him. The good thing is that, with comes suffering, comes a strengthening of faith, and God can even cause people to come to faith through people's suffering and seeing how they deal with people's suffering. Like, I remember this one lady who was diagnosed with cancer, and I feel like she was either late 60s, probably late 60s, and she didn't even want to be treated because she was that confident where she was going. I mean, even for me as a pastor to see that does crazy, amazing things for my own faith, to see that in people. And so as people see that they're encouraged by it, and people come to faith through pain and suffering. God has experienced it himself. And the ultimate good news in this, especially remember this as you're going through it yourself, is that God is with us. God is with us in our pain and suffering. His promise is he's never going to leave us. He's never going to forsake us. Listen, in this world, we can't not have pain and suffering. It's part of this world. But God doesn't abandon us to our pain and suffering. In fact, Paul talks about that in the midst of his pain and suffering. Like, when he's at his weakest, when he's pleading to God that God would take away that pain and suffering from him, that he calls out to him, like, take it away. Just remove it. But God's answer is, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly, Paul says, about my weaknesses. Like, I'm going to stop asking God to take it away, because I know, even though I don't like it, in my weakness, I'm strong because God is with me and I'm relying on him. So in your pain and suffering, rejoice in the fact that God is with us in it. I'm here to tell you, like, I don't know that this makes you feel any better or not. It really is irrelevant if it makes you feel better or not. Like, pain and suffering is part of this world. That's just fact. But know that there's purpose in it, that God uses it for your benefit and the benefit of people around, and that he knows what it's like to even go through it. I appreciate you joining me for this episode of God Talk, and I look forward to talking to you next time. God bless, and have a great day.